You may have seen that publicity stunt put on by the Democrats where they all got on one knee in a moment of silence for George Floyd. Well, they did it wearing something called a kente cloth. It was the scarves or whatever they wore around their necks. Well, I guess I've got some bad news for Democrats. They are being mocked and actually being slammed because the kente cloth actually predominantly comes from a tribe called the Ashanti tribe or the Ashanti Empire, which made a very large sum of money selling slaves. And I'm just learning this now, but apparently in their effort to appease the black community, they did not understand what they were wearing or what it meant, and they ended up pissing off a ton of people and shocking a lot of other people. So let me read this story for you, and then just pull up the Wikipedia entry talking about how the Ashanti sold slaves. All right, man. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack because of the Trump photo op thing. I'm being a bit facetious on the Democrats. I get it. They're doing their thing. They're trying to show solidarity. I get it. Trump did something similar with the church. Yeah, man. They want to show that they're in support of some cause or whatever. You get it? Okay, let's read the story. Fox says, Black Twitter users mock Dems for donning kente cloth. Don't treat Africans like we're children. Suffice it to say, at the very least, this backfired. And you could say something similar about Trump and his thing in front of the church when the bishop came out and slammed him for it. But I got to be honest. I think a lot of people who are religious and conservative liked that Trump did it. It's not so clear cut, but I know this story isn't about Trump. Let's read about the kente cloths. Congressional Democrats' attempt to look woke appeared to backfire on them Monday when a series of black Twitter users accused them of cultural appropriation. And there it is. There's no appeasing the mob. Author Obianuju Ekiocha posted a video telling Democrats to stop virtue signaling by wearing African cloth in the Capitol. Here, I agree. Excuse me, dear Democrats, she said. In your tokenism, you didn't wait to find out that this thing you're hanging around your neck is not just some African uniform. It's actually the kente material. The kente belongs to the Ghanaian people, mainly the Ashanti tribe. Excuse me, Democrats, she continued. Don't treat Africans like we're children. These fabrics and these colorful things that we have within our culture and tradition, they all mean something to us. I know you look at us and say, oh, Africans are so cute in all of your colorful dresses. Well, some of those dresses and patterns and colors and fabrics actually do mean something to us. Ekiocha went on to ask why Democrats were using the cloth for their own show of non-racism. She said, I'm sure someone told them that the fabric represents black people, but in truth, a Nigerian like me cannot lay claim to the significant fabric, which is very much part of the Ghanaian identity. Dear Democrats, these colors and patterns belong to ancient tribes and mean something to us. Black commentator Hotep Jesus suggested Democrats were engaging in cultural appropriation. How is this not a cultural appropriation, he asked, alongside a photo of House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer. There's more. Frederick Joseph, a former surrogate for Elizabeth Warren, laid out a series of criticisms for Democrats. He took special aim at House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who knelt in the Capitol Visitor Center while wearing the cloth. I'm going to tell my children, this is Nancy Pelosi, he said. If anyone can't understand why Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and them dressed up like they're trying to sneak into Wakanda is disrespectful and appropriative, you have a great deal to learn. So there's more. Here's Ted Lieu. Others, including Fox Nation host David Webb, piled on as well, saying, when congressional Democrats virtue signal through cultural appropriation. David Webb said, isn't wearing the African scarves cultural appropriation, or are we past that? Angie Thomas says, Wakanda mess is this? Ooh, spicy. The kneeling served as an effort to memorialize George Floyd. And to an extent, I can respect that. But come on, man, you shouldn't be kneeling. Please. It was a display that everyone criticized. Conservatives criticized it and progressives criticized it. All right. The kneeling also referenced an ongoing protest trend harkening back to former NFL player Colin Kaepernick and his demonstration during the national anthem. Pelosi said on Monday that members of Congress would be kneeling in a place where they typically recited the Pledge of Allegiance. Democrats unveiled sweeping new legislation Monday that, if passed, aims to increase accountability of police officers. Okay. Look, I'm all about police reform. I get it. But let's get to the spicy portion of this that you came here to read about. That's what they say. This woman says the kente belongs to the Ghanaian people, mainly the Ashanti tribe. Okay, well, I decided to look up the Ashanti Empire. The Ashanti Empire, maybe it's not the right thing. Maybe I'm wrong. It says the Kingdom of Ashanti. And they have a special section they call slavery. So let me scroll down here. They say this. This is the kente cloth. The traditional garment worn by the Ashanti royalty has been widely adopted throughout the Ashanti kingdom. Slavery. Let me start with European contact. They say, actually, let me zoom in on this to make it a little easier to read. European contact with the Ashanti on the Gulf of Guinea coast region of Africa began in the 15th century. This led to trade in gold, ivory, slaves, and other goods with the Portuguese, which gave rise to kingdoms such as the Ashanti. On May 15th, 1817, the Englishman Thomas Bodick entered Kumasi. He remained there for several months, was impressed, and on his return to England wrote a book, Mission from Cape Coast Castle to Ashanti. His praise of the kingdom was disbelieved, as it contradicted prevailing prejudices. Joseph Dupuy, the first bishop consul in Kumasi, arrived on March 23, 1820. Both Bodick and Dupuy secured a treaty with the Ashanti Henny, but the Governor Hope Smith did not meet Ashanti expectations. It's actually really interesting because you can see that they had architecture and things like that. They even had big buildings. Look at this. Before British colonialization, they actually had very large buildings. They had their own empire, as it were. And people, the prejudices didn't allow for these people to believe it. Isn't that amazing, huh? Well, the Democrats, not realizing what they were getting into, let me read you this. Slavery was historically a tradition in the Ashanti Empire, with slaves typically taken as captives from enemies in warfare. The welfare of their slaves varied from being able to acquire wealth and intermarry with the master's family to being sacrificed in funeral ceremonies. The Ashanti believed that slaves would follow their masters into the afterlife. Slaves could sometimes own other slaves and could also request a new master if the slave believed he or she was being severely mistreated, which is a really weird way to describe slavery. The modern-day Ashanti claim that slaves were seldom abused, and that a person who abused a slave was held in high contempt by society. They defend the humanity of Ashanti slaves. Doesn't that sound a little familiar? A little familiar to people in this country who try to defend slavery? Yeah, slavery is indefensible. I'm sorry, man. People have, in this country, our founding fathers believed that all men were created equal with certain inalienable rights gifted to them by their creator. And although it didn't necessarily reflect the society at the time, we strive to uphold those values today. So even, yes, we can criticize the Ashanti tribe. And the Democrats want to wear the garb of this tribe, sure, fine, but at least look into their history. Because although it wouldn't necessarily be the same as, say, waving a Confederate flag, isn't it still kind of like that? You should pay attention to what you're doing, because as these other people said, for one, it's cultural appropriation, but also they don't realize what these things mean. Here's what they say. The favored arrangement, British relations. Here we go. No, let's not read this. Let's read this. The favored arrangement occurred primarily because of what some men considered their conflict with the matrilineal system. Under this kinship system, children were considered born into the mother's clan and took their status from her family. Generally, her eldest brother served as a mentor, particularly for the boys. She was protected by her family. Some Ashanti men felt more comfortable taking a slave girl or pawn wife in marriage, as she would have no abusua, older male grandfather, uncle, or brother to intercede on her behalf when the couple argued. With an enslaved wife, the master and husband had total control of their children, and she had no kin in the community. That's what they were representing? Okay. I want to be fair, all right? I'm seeing the meme go around, but look, this photo here, image of Ashanti home in Kumasi before British colonization, it's actually kind of impressive. There are many things that you can look at in this society and deem to be impressive and want to uphold as valuable and virtuous even. And there are a lot of really, really bad things they did too. The reality is the same is true for us. We can look back on the bad things and criticize them and not necessarily believe that those garments represent those bad things today. So even though the Democrats wanted to wear this, let's just be real. They had no idea what they were wearing. And the real offense they caused is cultural appropriation. I don't think anyone on the left is coming out and saying they were wearing the garments of slave traders, but the reality is they technically were. We don't look back on these symbols and say they represent exactly what they represented in the past, and we've got to be fair about that for a lot of reasons. You can argue that the Confederate flag means something, but you can also argue it doesn't mean the same thing today. You can argue the same thing about the swastika, the original depiction of it from ancient, East Asian tribes and cultures, very different to what the Nazis did with it. You can take a look at the Gadsden flag. The Gadsden flag representing liberty and rejecting authority. But now many people on the left say it's actually a symbol of the far right. If symbols can be changed, they can't always just be negative, can they? But this is what we get from the mainstream media. They will tell you that certain symbols can never change. Then they'll tell you that certain symbols that once represented good things now must be evil because they changed. We can't have that, right? So listen, I don't know what this cloth represents. I think it was stupid for them to wear it. But this is too good. If you want to complain about symbols of the past and argue the Gadsden flag is actually racist, well, then I would argue so is the thing the Democrats are wearing now. So Democrats, next time you try to virtue signal, make sure you don't wear cloth that comes from an empire notorious for trading in slaves. Maybe you can actually just try and be regular people, have real conversations, or maybe actually work on kitchen table issues that will actually help people. But I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment's coming up in a few minutes, and I will see you all shortly.